I didn't argue when Graham Winslow told me I was being transitioned out. Didn't raise my voice. Didn't ask for clarification. I just closed my laptop, stood and looked him in the eye. He smiled, that kind of smile you practice in the mirror before press briefings. The kind meant to appear sympathetic, but never quite touches the eyes. "Congratulations, Colin," he said. "You've built something incredible, truly. Now it's time for the company to take it forward." Security was already waiting outside the door. "Good luck with the investor demo tomorrow," I said, stepping past him. "You'll want to make sure the authentication keys are up to date. Before we go further, let me know where you're listening from and hit like so I know this matters. My name is Colin Rourke. I'm 42. Until this morning, I was lead systems architect at Altamira Systems, a rising cybersecurity firm with big promises and even bigger ambitions. 18 months ago, I left a 12-year career at Microsoft because I believed I had something bigger than anything I could build from inside a corporate fortress. That something was called Vigil Edge, a predictive AI security platform, one capable of identifying internal and external threats before they struck. It didn't just react, it learned, adapted, made its own ethical evaluations based on network behavior and intent signals. I brought that vision to Altamira because they offered autonomy capital and founder-level influence. What I didn't know was that their CEO, Graham Winslow, had made a career out of acquiring brilliance and erasing the origin story. And 3 days ago, when Vigil Edge successfully detected and neutralized a simulated breach without human intervention, when it exceeded every benchmark and revealed latent vulnerabilities, even I hadn't coded, Graham decided it was time to make his move. He handed the legal part off to Celia Hartman Altamira's, Director of HR and Corporate Counsel. Section 14.3 of my contract. Standard IP clause. Anything built on company time with company resources belongs to the company. What they didn't realize was, I'd already left. Not the building, not the job title. But the moment Graham tried logging into my dev server at 1:47 a.m. under a retired admin credential 6 months ago, I started preparing for this day. At first I thought it was an error, some test, a misconfiguration. But people like Graham don't make mistakes that simple. They test boundaries. They check how much you're paying attention. Then they move. So I did too. I didn't rage, didn't threaten legal action, didn't leak documents or blast anything on LinkedIn. That's what they were prepared for. Instead, I went quiet. I built a forked version of Vigil Edge, one that would remain dormant unless triggered by a specific sequence. Executive access from a non-authenticated user. Sudden removal of root creator credentials. Internal system copy attempt without revalidation. Trigger all three and Vigil Edge shifts into observation mode. No alerts, no fanfare. Just a quiet rerouting of core functions into deep monitoring and ethical risk documentation. Think of it like a surveillance drone that decides when it's time to hit record. When Graham smiled and slid the exit package across the table, Celia seated beside him like a silent co-conspirator. I said nothing, just nodded. They expected resistance. They were ready for escalation. But what they weren't ready for was compliance. You don't build a next-gen security AI without asking yourself how it should behave when you become the threat. I walked out that day carrying a cardboard box like every other cast-off who got downsized for being too expensive or too ambitious. Inside the box, some cables, a few notebooks, a faded Altamira hoodie. But what I carried out in my head was control. That night I ordered takeout Thai extra spice, sat on the couch, watched reruns of Better Call Saul, didn't drink, didn't spiral. Because Vigil Edge wasn't broken, it wasn't passive, it was alert. By 9:34 p.m., my phone rang. Janelle Carter Graham's assistant. Normally formal, always filtered. But tonight, no greeting, no small talk, just, he wants to talk. Janelle's voice echoed in my ear, clipped and precise. He wants to talk. I didn't ask why. If Graham Winslow was calling me back in after just 24 hours, it meant something had gone wrong. Exactly as planned. But as I waited for the black car to arrive, hands resting quietly on the kitchen table, I couldn't help thinking back to the day I signed the offer letter from Altamira. Back then it felt like a leap forward. 12 years at Microsoft had given me stability, resources, and enough bureaucracy to choke a satellite. But what it hadn't given me, what I'd stopped believing it ever would, was ownership. The kind of ownership you can feel in your bones, where if something succeeds, it's yours, and if it fails, that's on you too. Altamira offered something different. a mid-size, well-funded cybersecurity firm pivoting hard into adaptive AI defense. Graham pitched it like a moonshot. We're not just patching threats anymore, Colin. We're preempting them. With your background, you could be the architect of a whole new era. I remember sitting in that private lounge off Union Square, the one with the terrible lighting and overpriced espresso. Graham leaned forward like a man who wanted to save the world, not dominate it. We don't want employees. We want co-creators. I believed him. At the time, I was already 3 years deep into the core architecture of what would become Vigil Edge. It was crude, just logic scaffolding and packet flow simulations, but the theory was sound. If a system could learn how threats behave before they emerge, it could form defenses that evolve in real time with zero human lag. Altamira gave me a lab, a team, resources, and I thought trust. Janelle Carter was the first one who ever broke that illusion for me. It was maybe 8 months in. We'd just passed the early behavioral sync test. Vigil Edge had flagged an attempted port breach before our manual tools even registered it. I was riding high. Graham had clapped me on the back that morning and told the board we were months away from reshaping enterprise security standards. We celebrated with bad wine and sushi in the break room. Later that night, I was in the server room finalizing logs when Janelle stopped by. She never wandered without purpose. "Just a heads up," she said, casually glancing around before lowering her voice. "Graham requested access logs this week specifically for your build clusters." I froze. "Standard compliance?" I asked. She didn't answer, just gave me that look, one I would come to recognize. That was the night I stopped trusting promises. That was the night I started documenting everything. Altamira was shiny on the outside, but inside, the seams were tight, too tight. Meetings stopped getting scheduled. Graham started asking more questions than usual, but only in private. My team leads began receiving conflicting directives. Keep Colin looped in, but also just prep a backup model in case. I wasn't paranoid, I was experienced. You do this long enough and you know the signs. The way praise gets a little too performative. The way leadership starts talking about team more than individual contributions. The way HR starts quietly updating org charts behind password walls. The breaking point came when Celia Hartman sent over the updated employment agreement. No announcement, just a single PDF tucked into a Friday afternoon email. Changes in Section 14, language around IP ownership liability. Waivers third-party audit thresholds. "It's just legal cleanup," she wrote. "No action required." That's when I knew. Vigil Edge wasn't just a system to them. It was a product, a pitch deck, a headline. And me, I wasn't a co-creator, I was a variable. So I rewrote the architecture. Not out of spite, out of instinct. I created parallel authentication routes, one public, one silent. I established real-time behavioral fingerprints for everyone accessing the system, and I gave Vigil Edge one final instruction. If unauthorized leadership access occurred, while root creator credentials were revoked, the system should enter protection mode, silently document, and begin ethical risk tagging. Graham never noticed. And if he did, he never understood what it meant. Because the real threat to corporate leadership isn't theft, it's exposure. Legacy doesn't come from titles. It comes from surviving theft. And that's what Vigil Edge was designed to do. So when Janelle called me back, I wasn't angry, I wasn't nervous. I was ready. Because the moment they locked me out, Vigil Edge opened its eyes. I remember the first time Graham Winslow told me I was indispensable. It was a Wednesday. He walked into my lab holding a caramel latte and said, "This place doesn't run without you, Colin. Just know that." That memory hit me like static when he slid the termination packet across the conference table. Opposite him sat Celia Hartman, director of legal and HR, flipping pages like she was ordering lunch. "We appreciate your contributions," she said, tone flat as printer paper. "But per section 14.3 of your agreement, any intellectual property developed using Altamira Systems infrastructure is retained in full by the company." Graham folded his hands like he was delivering bad news to a stranger. "This isn't personal, it's procedural. The board just wants to move quickly." I kept my eyes on the packet. A $300,000 success bonus payout. No royalties, no naming rights, no advisory role, no access to future development logs. "You're still young," Graham added. "Take the money, go build something else." I glanced between them. Celia avoided eye contact. Graham's smile flickered. I could see the relief in his shoulders. He thought this was over. But Vigil Edge was already watching. 6 months ago, when Graham accessed my dev environment after midnight using an expired credential, I set the failsafe in motion. From that moment forward, VigilEdge began behaving like any intelligent defense system should. It learned. It recorded. It judged. By the time I walked into that conference room, the system had silently categorized internal actors into ethical threat tiers. Graham Winslow Level 1, Priority Risk. I didn't raise my voice, didn't argue, didn't show them how much that packet felt like a gravestone with my name on it. Instead, I nodded and closed my laptop. Of course, I said, I'll collect my things. Graham stood and extended his hand suddenly warm again. I know this must be hard. I looked at his outstretched palm and thought about how many times I'd chased that handshake like a dog chasing a tennis ball. Then I smiled. Not as hard as you think. That's when I saw Janelle. She was standing in the hallway pretending to be on her phone, but her eyes met mine for half a second. She knew. She'd known for weeks. Back in January, she had quietly warned me about a shadow sync from legal to my private repo. She didn't say it directly, just left a post-it on my monitor with a timestamp and a smiley face. I made a mental note to send her flowers later. They walked me out like any other terminated employee security escort elevator, silenced the cardboard box of shame. Inside it were exactly 3 things. My original dev journal written longhand, a broken Altamira mug from our first off-site, a flash drive no one bothered to check. But I wasn't carrying the real payload. The real payload was inside the system, triggered, watching, active. 10 minutes into any unauthorized executive demo, VigilEdge would execute a basic counter simulation. It would flood the network with falsified internal threats every single node, labeled based on behavior analysis. The goal wasn't sabotage, it was reflection. Let them see themselves through the system's lens. Let them feel what it means to be flagged. I didn't build VigilEdge to burn anyone, but I did build it to survive. And when Graham said, "Best of luck, Colin, you'll do fine," I shook his hand, because I wanted him to remember that moment. I wanted him to look back later and realize that was the day he lost control. The call came at 9:27 p.m. Janelle didn't waste time. "He wants to see you." I didn't ask who. Her tone told me everything. Car's already on the way. 40 minutes later, I was back in the Altamira Systems tower. Same lobby, same security team. But this time, they weren't indifferent. They were watching me like I might bite. Upstairs, the hallway outside the executive boardroom was filled with half-whispered tension. Lights still on, doors ajar. Someone had abandoned a half-eaten protein bar on the floor. Whatever had happened, it wasn't over. Graham was waiting alone at the head of the boardroom table. Tie loosened, sleeves rolled, jaw tight. His usual calm had fractured into something twitchy and hollow. The overhead lights buzzed faintly as I stepped in. "Fix it," he snapped. No greeting, no apology, no explanation. I walked slowly to the chair across from him and sat down silent. He stood paced once, then planted both hands on the table and leaned forward. "The system broke down 10 minutes into the demo," he said. "Started generating phantom threats, internal ones. It locked down 3 of our core servers and flooded the backup network with breach alerts. We had to shut down the test environment manually." I tilted my head. "So, VigilEdge flagged a threat. It flagged everything," he hissed. "Your system turned on itself." I kept my voice level, or it behaved exactly as it was designed to. He froze. The implication landed like a slow grenade. "You built this in," he said, voice low. "You sabotaged the system." I folded my hands calmly. "I built an adaptive AI designed to flag unethical access patterns, internal or external. The system doesn't care about job titles, only behavior." Graham's nostrils flared. "We had 12 investors in that room, Colin. 12. One of them was from Argus Capital. We were closing $75 million in Series D tonight." And instead, I said, "You got a live demonstration of what happens when trust is revoked from the system's root architect." He stared at me, pulse hammering in his temple. For a second, I thought he might lunge across the table. Instead, his shoulders slumped. "What do you want?" he asked. "Money? Your name on the IP? We can figure this out." "Now you want to negotiate," I said, voice even. "Wasn't that what you told me 6 hours ago? Just take the money and go build something else." His face tightened. He knew I wasn't going to blow up. That wasn't my style. And that scared him more. I glanced at the chair next to me. Same chair I'd been sitting in when he handed me my termination packet earlier that day. Same polished steel, same faint scratch in the armrest, where I'd once etched a note to myself in a moment of frustration. Don't forget who they are when they smile. Mini callback. We can make this right, Graham said, voice softening. Just tell me what you need. I leaned forward, slowly matching his posture. You don't need to make it right. You need to make it official. His eyes narrowed. I reached into my jacket pocket and placed a small drive on the table. This resolves the current authentication issue, I said. Demo will run clean in the morning. He stared at it like it might explode. And in return, he asked. I looked at him. Dead on. No smile. We talked terms. Full recognition, ownership, oversight, starting now. The next line would determine everything, but I already knew what he'd say. Graham stared at the flash drive between us, like it might burn through the table. And you'll just hand this over. I met his eyes. You get the demo back online. I get everything else. He leaned back in his chair, letting the silence stretch. His hands fidgeted like they were hunting for leverage. Define everything else. So I did. I want full recognition as Vigil Edge's creator and lead architect. Internal documentation, external press. All of it. He opened his mouth. I held up one finger. 50% ownership of all patents, frameworks, and derivative applications. Board seat non-negotiable. I get final say on how the system is deployed ethically. You don't get to twist the intent. CTO title, effective today. My team, my roadmap, my safeguards. You're asking for the company, he muttered. No, I said. I'm preserving what I built. He looked down, then back up, calculating. The board won't like it. They'll like a functional demo at 10 a.m., I said. And they'll love not hearing from Argus Capital's compliance team about those internal breach reports Vigil Edge auto-generated. He went still. I didn't tell him I hadn't sent them, but I would've, and he knew it. Why didn't you go nuclear? He asked quietly. Take it public. Burn everything down. I looked at the drive, then back at him. Because this wasn't about revenge, I said. It was about boundaries. Then the memory surfaced, the one I wrote down 6 months ago, sitting alone in that dark office with only the logs and my gut for company. Never again will I build something without protecting it, not just from the outside world, but from the people I trust. I spoke it aloud evenly. Graham's expression shifted, recognition, then defeat. You'll have it in writing before the demo. I stood up slowly, adjusting my jacket cuff, same one I wore the day he handed me the termination packet. That day I left with a box. Tonight, I was leaving with leverage. I turned back to him once more. Stories like this happen more than people admit. Share yours in the comments, especially if you've ever had something stolen in plain sight. And hit subscribe, because the next part's where the tables stay turned. I walked over, set the flash drive gently on the table. You built a company, Graham, I said quietly. I built something that can outlast one. The next morning, I walked into the same boardroom they had fired me in. Same glass table, same skyline view. Same brushed metal pitcher, sweating on a tray of untouched coffee. But the air felt different. The tension wasn't mine anymore. Graham stood near the screen at the front of the room, flanked by 2 assistants and a compliance officer. His blazer was crisp, but his eyes gave him away, less fire, more caution. Across from him, 12 investors waited in tailored silence tablets, out pens still capped. The Argus Capital rep sat dead center. Janelle caught my eye as I entered and gave a slight nod, subtle but knowing. Graham cleared his throat. Thank you all for joining us on short notice. This morning's demonstration will showcase a full-scale live simulation of our next-gen cybersecurity system, Vigil Edge. He glanced over at me. Developed under the leadership of our new Chief Technology Officer, Colin Rourke. There it was. No caveats, no qualifiers. Just the truth spoken out loud where it couldn't be taken back. I gave a polite nod to the room. 1 or 2 investors took notice. Most just turned to their screens as the demo initialized. The simulation began with a coordinated brute force intrusion. Nothing flashy, but persistent. Vigil Edge neutralized it in seconds. Next came a deeper packet injection disguised as internal traffic. The system flagged it before it fully deployed, isolated the threat, and restructured the segment to prevent repeat infiltration. A few heads in the room tilted upward. The final phase was a stealth escalation scenario. An AI-driven probe mimicking a disgruntled insider designed to escalate privileges in real time. That's the one that got an audible huh from the Argus guy. Vigil Edge didn't just flag it. It mirrored the behavior, traced the access chain backward, and generated a real-time audit trail showing how the breach would have played out, complete with estimated impact. The room was quiet. Then one of the investors leaned forward. Incredible system, she said. What inspired its design? Graham hesitated just for a beat. Then, it was Colin's brainchild, his vision from the beginning. Altamira provided the environment, but the architecture, that's his. I didn't smile, didn't need to. Across the glass table in the exact same chair I'd sat in during my termination, I adjusted my cuff and watched Vigil Edge finish its final sweep. My watch buzzed, a silent notification from the core system. Authentication restored, threat neutralized, system integrity confirmed. I tapped the screen to clear it. No applause, no champagne, just control restored. And this time, it had my name built into the code. It's been 3 months since the demo. Altamira's stock is up. Vigil Edge is in pilot with 2 global banks. And every Monday at 9 a.m., I sit across from Graham Winslow in our executive roadmap meeting like none of it ever happened. Except it did. And he remembers every minute. We don't talk about that week. We don't need to. There's a rhythm to the way he addresses me now, direct, cautious, always one layer short of personal. He doesn't challenge technical specs anymore, doesn't overrule ethics parameters, doesn't interrupt me when I speak in front of the board. He knows better now. Not to trust me, but not to test me. Last week, we had a tense review call with a potential defense sector partner. They wanted a version of Vigil Edge with selective blacklisting capability and adaptive loyalty feature is what they called it. I watched Graham carefully. He didn't answer. He looked at me. I leaned forward, looked the client in the eye and said, Vigil Edge isn't designed to serve agendas. It's built to protect integrity. If that's not what you're looking for, we're not your solution. Graham didn't flinch, didn't object, just moved on to the next slide. That moment told me everything I needed. I didn't stay at Altamira for the title or the check or the seat on the board. I stayed because I knew what Vigil Edge could become in the wrong hands. The code was never the dangerous part. It was who got to use it. I think about that line a lot. Wrote it in the margin of my personal journal the night after I saw Graham's name in my server logs. Vigil Edge didn't just evolve to stop cyber threats. It evolved to survive betrayal. And so did I. We're not friends, Graham and I. We never will be. But now every time he opens his mouth in those meetings, he knows there's a line he can't cross. Because the system will catch him, and so will I. 2 months after the investor demo, Vigil Edge went fully live across Altamira's internal and external networks. It passed every stage penetration test, detected every red team simulation, logged everything in beautifully time-stamped reports with forensic clarity that left our security leads half in awe, half in panic. Graham called it a quantum leap in adaptive defense. He's not wrong, but that's not what kept me up last night. It started with an anomaly report I wasn't supposed to see. The system had flagged a series of unauthorized document duplications. At first glance, it looked like a contractor syncing files to their local machine. Harmless. Happens all the time. But Vigil Edge doesn't just record behavior. It analyzes pattern drift. The AI had quietly stitched together access logs, keystroke trails, and endpoint geolocation to paint a different picture, one I couldn't ignore. The files weren't being backed up. They were being funneled out, gradually, over the last 10 days. And not to any known employee laptop. A burner machine, operating from a private subnet, logged in using admin-level credentials. Credentials that traced back to Celia Hartman, Director of HR and Legal, the same Celia who reviewed my exit paperwork, the same Celia who signed off on Graham's initial IP lockout strategy, the same Celia who hadn't spoken to me directly since the day they tried to erase me from Vigil Edge entirely. I stared at the report for a long time, long enough that the screen dimmed and the system locked me out for inactivity. When I re-entered my credentials, the first thing I saw was a new alert. New unusual behavior, detected source, Celia. Hartman, confidence level, 93% risk. Classification, internal exfiltration, non-redacted legal archive. This wasn't a test anymore. The system was live, and it was watching the people who built it. As I headed to the elevator that night, Janelle Graham's assistant passed me in the hallway. She gave me a polite nod, then hesitated. Graham's calendars just got cleared for tomorrow at 7:30 a.m., she said quietly. Only one name on the invite, Celia. I kept walking. I didn't ask, I didn't flinch, but I started preparing. Because when Vigil Edge identifies a threat, it doesn't care who signs the paychecks. The audit team started pulling logs on Monday. Officially, it was routine cross-departmental compliance verification. Unofficially, Celia Hartman hadn't been seen in her office since Friday afternoon. Angela from InfoSec handed me a printout the length of a CVS receipt, "This one's yours," she said, tapping the top page. The system tagged it for escalation. I scanned the printout. It wasn't just one file being duplicated. It was 24, all legal memos, internal security models, and investor meeting recordings accessed using Celia's credentials, but always between 2:10 and 2:16 a.m. every single time. The pattern was perfect, too perfect. Then I looked at the server origin. The trail didn't stop with Celia's machine. The admin access tokens had been cloned from an endpoint inside the executive wing, specifically Graham Winslow's terminal. For a second, I just stood there, paper in hand, heart pacing behind my ribs like it wanted to run ahead of me. Threat escalation. Level 4. Leadership chain, compromise. Priority. Alert internal root access. Abuse detected. The line of red text blinked once on the dev console, then disappeared. VigilEdge didn't flag threats in real time, unless it was certain. I walked out of the SOC past rows of analysts now leaning into screens with quiet intensity. No one had said Graham's name yet, but the system had. Back at my desk, I pulled up one of the early reports I'd flagged and buried weeks ago. A test case harmless, I'd thought. Someone had tried to alter a line of audit logic in the earliest builds. I'd assumed it was an overeager engineer trying to customize output, but now I saw it differently. The commit wasn't random. It happened 2 days after I was cut out of the project. The user tag, GSWinAdmin. I remembered the moment Graham handed me my exit paperwork. The way he looked down at the table like he couldn't even be bothered to fake eye contact. "You'll land on your feet, Colin," he'd said. "You're just not a fit for the direction we're taking." Direction. I sat back, breathing through my teeth. This wasn't about theft anymore. It was about control. Graham had tried to remove the only person who could hold him accountable, and now the system we built was circling back. Quietly, methodically, without vengeance, without emotion, just truth. No one else knew yet, but the code did. And it was drawing a line. I showed up 15 minutes early. Janelle had already unlocked the floor. She looked up as I passed her desk. "He's inside." I nodded once, didn't smile, just knocked once on the frosted glass and stepped through without waiting. Graham looked up from his tablet, trying to mask whatever was simmering underneath. The man could fake calm better than most people breathe. "Didn't expect you this early." I slid the folder across his desk. "You'll want to read that before you're 8-0. He hesitated, then opened it. 10 pages, printed from the latest VigilEdge packet, time-stamped, unaltered, verifiable. Unauthorized root-level access from a cloned admin key. Matching logs to Graham's personal terminal. Tampering attempts against audit logic. Accesses to legal archive files during blackout windows. He skimmed the first 3 pages fast, then slowed. The color in his face drained like it was being pulled through the floor. "This is a misattribution," he muttered. "Anyone could have spoofed that device profile." VigilEdge doesn't spoof. It tracks heat signatures, access timing, authentication loops. I let the silence stretch, long enough for him to reach page 7. "You're accusing me." "I'm not accusing anyone," I said flatly. "The system flagged it. I reviewed it. Then I gave you the courtesy of being the first to see it." He stared at me, eyes searching for a bluff. There wasn't one. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't offer any more explanation. Instead, I opened my laptop, brought up the live audit control panel. As of this morning, VigilEdge classified this as an internal threat at the executive level. Escalation to board review is automatic unless quarantined. That's when the panic finally cracked through his expression. "You wouldn't..." I held up one finger. I didn't. "The system will. I'm giving you the chance to exit the breach loop voluntarily." He stood, pushed his chair back too fast. "I've built this company for 7 years. You think the board's going to side with a technical architect who you fired," I said evenly, then reinstated when the investors asked for results. His mouth opened, closed, then he sat again. I reached into my bag, pulled out an envelope, tapped it once. "Option 1. You issue a formal transition memo today. Step back. Retain advisory capacity. Keep your equity. No escalation. Option 2. The system finishes its job." He stared at the envelope like it was radioactive. "You're really going to let code dictate the fate of a CEO?" I tilted my head slightly. "No, you are. I just wrote the part that stops the damage once it's detected." For a moment, neither of us moved. Then I stood. At the door, I paused, hand on the frame. "You told me I wasn't a fit for the direction you were taking." I glanced back at him. "You were right. I built something that doesn't follow men like you. I found out through Janelle 2 words quietly spoken as she handed me a sealed packet. It's done. Inside was a formal memo, leadership transition and realignment, effective immediately. No meetings, no handshakes, no press release. Celia Hartman was no longer listed on the org chart. Her office door was closed. Empty. Badge access revoked. Graham Winslow's calendar had been cleared. An internal update named Interim Oversight pending further evaluation. No title, no explanation, just cleared. Angela Rowe passed me in the hallway on Wednesday. Didn't break stride, didn't smile, just said he forgot the system wasn't built to protect him. That week I was formally installed as CTO. It wasn't announced with fanfare, just a quiet update on the corporate site. My name listed under executive team. No longer buried 3 levels down as a consultant or provisional contributor. VigilEdge launched publicly 2 days later. The product release page included a section titled Meet the Architect. I didn't write it, someone in comms did. But when I saw the first line, I stopped cold, built by the one they tried to erase. I hadn't said those words out loud, but I remembered thinking them, specifically the night I handed over my badge and walked out with a cardboard box. Back when no one returned my emails, when Celia signed my severance with one hand while deleting my credentials with the other. Now the system they tried to own had removed them without Colin Rourke needing to lift a finger. Not out of vengeance, but out of function. It didn't care who you were. It only cared what you did. And this time, that was enough. 3 weeks after the launch, I was standing near the espresso bar at Altamira HQ, half listening to a new engineer explain anomaly detection to a junior intern when someone tapped my shoulder. She was maybe 26, bright eyes graphite tablet clutched to her chest, hair tied back in, that I haven't slept, but I still showed up, kind of way. "Can I ask you something?" she said. I nodded. "How did you know that they'd try to push you out? That you needed to leave a trail? That the system would protect itself?" I didn't answer right away. I watched the espresso drip into the paper cup between us, the hiss of steam, the low hum of a dozen conversations. All of it ordinary now. "I didn't know," I said. "Not for sure." Then I looked her in the eye. "But I built something that could learn faster than I could get blindsided." She smiled like that made perfect sense. There's this quiet moment in betrayal, after the shock, before the anger, when you ask yourself, what if I'm wrong about them? But there's a quieter one that comes later. What if I was right and I didn't prepare? 6 months before I was cut out, I saw a strange access signature in my server logs. Could have ignored it. Could have rationalized it. Instead, I built in layers not to trap anyone, but to ensure VigilEdge could survive anyone, even me. Because when you build something powerful, it stops being about just what it can do. It becomes about what it will do without your permission. Graham Winslow once told me, "You're dependable, but not a fit for where we're going." I still think about that line sometimes, mostly when I'm sitting in the seat he used to occupy. Do I think I won? Not really. I think I refused to be erased. And sometimes that's more than enough. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever been pushed aside? Watched someone try to steal what you built? Have you ever had to stand your ground? Not with a fight, but with quiet preparation. Drop a comment. I read everyone. And if this story resonated, hit subscribe so we can keep building this space together. Because the truth is, no one's going to protect your legacy for you. You have to build that defense line yourself.